Hello. Today I'm going to talk about the global housing crisis. Now, to be clear, housing is important for social stability, and it's also important for personal stability, for personal well-being. So, the fact that at this point, the United Nations notes that about 1.6 billion people are improperly or unhoused, and that number is expected to go up to 3 billion by 2030. So it's a significant problem worldwide. There are several causes, there are several factors involved in the global housing crisis, including urbanization and population growth. Because rapid urbanization has led to an increasing demand for housing in cities, and rural occupants have been forced to migrate to urban areas in order to obtain employment. Cities often struggle to maintain their infrastructure to a point where they can house all of the people who need housing. It's expected that by 2050, urban areas will need to accommodate an additional 2.4 billion people worldwide. There are, of course, economic factors. Economic disparities have exacerbated the cost of housing, and that has made it more difficult for many people to obtain adequate housing. So, for example, between 2015 and 2024, housing prices increased 54% in the United States, 32% in China, and 15% in the European Union, while wage growth remains stagnant. There is, of course, a speculative investment. Essentially, housing has been turned into a financial issue. It's been turned into a goal of assets, and it makes it challenging for most people, many people, to afford housing. This is evident worldwide. So certainly we see this in Canada, you see it in the United States, it's seen all over the world where housing has become essentially a financial market. So again, that economic disparity results in some people having very nice housing and many people being inadequately or unhoused. Then, of course, there are regulations. So in some places, for example, these regulatory frameworks can impede the development of new housing projects. They can impede the access to land. They can make it very difficult for affordable housing initiatives to be put in place. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the housing crisis in Canada because I'm in Canada. So major Canadian cities, and those would be like Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, they've witnessed sharp increases in housing prices. So between 2015 and 2024, property values in these cities surged significantly and dramatically outpaced income. This has made it so that many more people in different cities in Canada, different places in Canada, are unable to afford adequate or any housing. There's also stagnancy in the housing market, in the housing supply. There's high mortgage rates. Investors are not investing in housing projects because of a lot of the regulatory issues. So we see this huge imbalance in the demand and the supply. And of course, because of global warming, there's been an increasing number of natural disasters, and that has impacted the housing supply and affordability. Now, there are several impacts, very significant impacts of the housing crisis. First of all, there's economic disparity because as the housing crisis has widened, so has the wealth gap. So those who had housing prior to these issues of instability and affordability are doing very well. They have access to good housing. They accumulate a great deal of wealth because they own property. And for the vast majority, this is not the case. It increases the financial strain on those who do not have access to affordable housing, were not able to purchase when the housing market was relatively inexpensive. Of course, this leads to social instability. So it leads to stress, mental health concerns, challenges in accessing basic education and employment. It can also, when we have overcrowded conditions, we know that leads to health concerns like disease. And of course, homelessness has been increasing dramatically in places like Canada, where we see, interestingly, the seniors becoming one of the fastest growing homeless populations. So as well, low-income families are significantly affected by the housing crisis. There are solutions. First of all, there need to be policy reforms. It includes reforming zoning laws. It includes allowing for higher density populations through those reformed zoning laws. And it also involves streamlining the procedures for example, developing affordable housing. Public-private partnerships would be quite valuable. So collaborations between governments and private developers could facilitate the development of affordable housing. We need to think about using more innovative construction methods. By embracing new technologies such as 3D printing and prefabricated materials, we can reduce costs and construction costs and the time involved. So in India, for example, the use of low-cost prefabricated panels has been approved by the government to cut the cost of building homes. Community land trusts that are nonprofit, for nonprofits that acquire land to provide affordable housing, would be very helpful if we removed this land from the speculative market. So community land trusts could ensure long-term affordability of housing. An example is the Dudley Neighbors Incorporated in Boston, Massachusetts, which stewards over 30 acres of controlled land, community-controlled land. And also the issue of financial support for both renters and buyers. So providing subsidies, tax incentives, low interest loans could assist some individuals in obtaining affordable housing. The fact is, this problem is not going to go away without significant intervention by governments and private developers interacting and working with governments. The housing crisis is becoming increasingly apparent in homelessness rates, in unsafe housing, and here in Canada, those issues have come to a crisis level. If we do something now, we may be able to offset the horrible danger we're in, but if we don't, it's just going to get worse. And if you enjoyed this video, I ask that you hit subscribe and like. It may not be important to you, but it's really important to me. With that, I say, to be senior is to be proud. Hugs.